G'day guys, today we've got a strawberry guava that I'm going to be working on. This tree was planted in our fruit tree orchard 4 or 5 years ago. It never fruited for us, it probably wasn't in the ground long enough, but we had another tree we wanted to replace it with. So I thought I'd dig it out, put it in a pot and see if I could do something with it as bonsai. It's probably about 2 years ago I pulled it out of the ground, cut a fair bit of timber off it and potted it up, let it reshoot, and it seems to respond really well. You could do just about anything to this thing and it just seems to bounce back. But it's got a lot of faults. It's got a lot of things that I don't really like about it. So we're going to have to be pretty brutal with it today to try and turn it into something that long term might look nice as a bonsai. I mean, some people might be happy to just put it in a pot like this and continue to work on the canopy, and you know, it might look okay, but to me it's still just a potted plant. It wouldn't be what a bonsai is meant to be. So we'll take it out of the pot, we'll have a look at its good points and its bad points, and we'll try and work out a plan going forward, see what we can do with it. Righto. You'll be able to see it a lot better now from... Okay. Right, so we do have a nice bit of thickness to the trunk, which is good. Originally, before this tree went into the ground, it did spend a long time in a pot before that. It's probably quite an old tree actually. But the consequence of that is the roots tend to be fairly in a mass. They, you know, when trees get root bound, the roots go round and round and don't really spread out. So we don't have a great root base, but we do have a little bit of width here, which is good. Nice little bit of taper coming up into here. The angle of this branch is pretty good. It puts a little bit of a curve in the trunk. The only problem with it is it's long and straight, which is pretty boring. So for me, I think that's not going to be a way forward. This branch down here, I think it's too low on the tree. I think to lose all this would be a shame. I don't know that there's too many other really good angles as a front. Here we've got a weird root coming around the back. I mean, we could probably chop that off. There's a little bit of root flare coming out this side. The branches still have all the same issues. The roots are just ugly from that side, so that's a no. I think either of these two sides where the roots flare out could be a front. I really believe that branch is too low. So I think to help in the decision-making process, if we've decided that that is definitely not going to be part of our end design, then it can just come off. It doesn't need to be there. So, off it goes. And we can clean up stubs and stuff later on, there's no issue. Even just clean that up a little now. Alright, so that cleans up that trunk line a bit. And you can see the taper in that trunk, which is what we try and keep, because the taper gives a nice impressive base and a bit of an impression of age. And if we could get the trunk to curve a little, you know, that always adds interest. I just don't know. If we could get shoots coming off down here that would then curve the trunk back this way again, we could be onto something. So we may even just cut this back and leave that long and hope for shoots back here. It does backbud really well, this tree, so that might be what we try and do. Failing that, if that doesn't work, I mean, we could cut that off, and that still gives us good taper up into here, and then we could try for backbuds on this one as well. So we've sort of got two options that we could go with for that one. For me, I'd probably like to see a bud come out of here somewhere, and I think it will if I cut it back. So we'll go ahead and do that. I know this looks pretty brutal, but if this doesn't get turned into a nice bonsai, it would have gone to the compost heap. And a lot of times you have to make these brutal cuts just to try and force the tree to backbud where you want it to backbud. And like I said, this tree does backbud really well, so I think it'll be okay. We might leave it with this little bit of foliage on top, just so we don't completely strip it. So we'll come back in a couple of months and have a look at where it's shot and where it's grown from. If we can get a shoot out of here somewhere, we can make that our new leader, which will be our new trunk line, and we can get rid of this branch completely, clean this up, and that will continue to grow. And then we can let that grow and thicken up, which will also help thicken the trunk and everything up. And then we can work on branches down lower and our branch structure and styling and whatever we want to do. But initially, we need to get the trunk how we want it. That's the first thing we need to concentrate on. The taper, the nice wide root base, the taper, any angular movement, and the branches can come later. We can grow them at any point, especially with a tree like this that backbuds like crazy. Might have a quick little dig around the top of the roots here. There's a couple that aren't great. We may be able to trim some of them off. And yeah, this one around the corner here, yeah, it's doubles back on itself. We don't really want that. It does have roots down into the ground from this corner, so we can get rid of that. It's not contributing anything really to the tree, and that'll stop it from rooting in the ground and then continuing around the corner. We may even get lucky, and that may start to thicken up and contribute to the base of our trunk, which would be good. And there are some nice thick roots here just under the surface, which is good. At a later date, we may just bring the whole tree up a little bit, lower the soil surface and expose some of these roots, and they'll continue to thicken up as the tree ages, and that'll just add to that, what they call the nabari, the root flare on the bottom, and that really adds to the image of age of a tree. But these ones here that wrap around the trunk and do silly things like that, they don't look nice. They just look weird. But you can't just chop them off initially when you first pop the tree up, otherwise the tree will end up with no roots. But at this stage, I think it's got a good enough root system, plenty of feeder roots everywhere, that we could probably start to chop a few of those back. It's hard to tell just how much that root is contributing to the tree. If we just work away at it. You don't have to pull the roots out as long as we cut them and remove them. I think that'll be much better. You can see where that root was wrapping around and how it cuts into the trunk. Without that there now, hopefully that'll heal up and maybe over time it'll match the rest of the trunk and it'll be not so obvious. So now if you can imagine, this root here has some small roots going into the ground here, and if we can encourage that, that root will continue to thicken up, and eventually you might get a nice root flare out this side. But you really need to encourage that root now to grow. And the same out this side, you've got this fella here. If you can encourage that to grow, they will get thicker and thicker and thicker. Just like branches, the more they grow, the thicker they get, and that'll contribute to the width of the base. And the same out the front. We've got a couple of roots here and there that are nice and thick and running in the right direction, and if we encourage those, they will get thicker and thicker over time, and we'll end up with a nice base. So this tree does have potential. It needs a hell of a lot of work and a bit of luck too for getting the branches in the right position. And we've got a couple options for the front. I mean, that's pretty ugly from that side, I think, but you know, maybe over time, if these thicken up and become nice thick roots down here, that one can be a nice one out the front, these out the side, it may turn into something, you know. Encourage some roots off of here will help thicken the front out and rebuild the front out here. Yeah, there's a lot of options. You can work with it over time. But I think that's enough for this tree for the day. We'll repot him back up, give him a good feed. Probably stick him in a shady spot for a couple of days so he doesn't get too much sun. They can stress out a little bit if they get too much sun after a big heap of work like that. But I know this tree, it's pretty resilient. It bounces back really easily. Yeah, so... Right, that'll do. Thanks for watching, and yeah, check back in a couple of months and we'll see how he's going. I'll give you an update along with a lot of the other stuff that we're doing here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.